On June 18, 1815, the First French Empire collapsed in the mud at Waterloo. It was the second bloodiest single day of the Napoleonic Wars. The defeat eliminated France as a hegemonic threat and handed Great Britain decades of unchecked global dominance, a period of relative peace historians call the Pax Britannica. But the erosion of Napoleon's military machine began long before that day. 3 years earlier, during the 1812 Russian campaign, his massive invasion force of 655,000 soldiers was decimated by logistics failures and a brutal winter, leaving only 93,000 survivors to retreat. By 1813, France was severely depleted and strategically encircled. The Sixth Coalition formed a unified front against a bloated, overextended French Empire. Allied armies were pressing in from all sides, threatening to cross the borders, dismantle the empire, and depose the emperor. Yet, in November 1813, the coalition offered Napoleon a secret diplomatic exit. The Frankfurt proposals gave him a choice to end the wars and remain on the throne. By refusing the offer, he chose a path that led directly to Waterloo. Had he accepted, he would have secured a treaty that permanently cemented French continental dominance. The Frankfurt proposals, delivered by Austrian diplomat Clemens von Metternich, carried one major condition: Napoleon had to abandon his claims to his wider European conquests, including Germany, Italy, and Spain. In exchange, France would be allowed to retain its natural borders, the Pyrenees, the Alps, and the Rhine River. This meant the permanent annexation of territories France did not hold before the wars, specifically Belgium, Savoy, and the entire left bank of the Rhineland. Compared to the sprawling, indefensible geography of 1812, this new map created a highly compact and easily fortified state. Anchoring the country to massive physical barriers, mountains, and a wide, fast-flowing river would severely limit the avenues for a land invasion, giving France a permanent defensive perimeter against the rest of Europe. A fortified border provided military security, but the real power of the 1813 map was economic. Keeping Belgium and the Saarland meant holding on to some of the most concentrated deposits of coal and iron in Europe. During the wars, Napoleon enforced the Continental Blockade, an economic embargo designed to isolate and starve British maritime trade. Because the blockade forced European markets to rely on domestic production, it accidentally fostered a highly protected infant industry inside France, mechanized cotton spinning, modeled on the multi-spindle jennies that drove British manufacturing. This chart illustrates the effect of that protectionism, tracking the price of cotton yarn between 1806 and 1807. The top line traces the artificially inflated prices in Paris, which successfully insulated French manufacturers from the cheaper, highly competitive British prices shown in London below. Shielded from British competition, French spinning capacity quadrupled. The nation rapidly developed the vast factories, the equipment, and the labor pool of a mature industrial base. If peace had been signed in 1813, France would have paired this modernized textile industry with the immense coal and iron reserves of its expanded eastern borders. With a protected domestic market, endless fuel, and unbreachable geographic defenses, France possessed the exact raw materials required to match and eventually surpass Britain's Industrial Revolution. The 1813 map also carried a severe penalty for France's continental rivals, falling most heavily on Prussia. By holding the left bank of the Rhine, France would actively deny Prussia access to the industrial heartland it relied on to build a modern, militarized economy. Without the coal and steel output of the Rhineland, a resource-starved Prussia lacks the economic leverage it used to aggressively unify Germany later in the 19th century. Accepting the Frankfurt proposals proactively neutralizes a unified Germany before it even forms, removing the singular military threat that would go on to plague France for the next 100 years. But in November 1813, Napoleon hesitated. Unwilling to accept the loss of his wider European conquests, he stalled negotiations and demanded more territory. The delay cost him everything. As Allied armies secured fresh victories on the battlefield, the coalition realized they no longer needed to compromise. They withdrew the Frankfurt proposals entirely. Months later, the Sixth Coalition invaded France. Napoleon lost his conquered territories, resulting in his first formal abdication and exile. When he briefly returned to power in 1815, He was stripped of the defensible borders, the resources, and the diplomatic leverage he held 2 years prior. He was forced into a desperate gamble against superior numbers in Belgium. By prioritizing total conquest over a sustainable industrial state, Napoleon guaranteed his own collapse. His refusal to compromise buried the French Empire at Waterloo and secured the 19th century for Great Britain.